are floating in open water, miles from shore. Nothing under your feet but a mile of cold black Pacific. And something the size of a bus is rising toward you. The tall black fin, the white patches, the body built like a torpedo with teeth, a killer whale. The ocean's most complete predator, an apex hunter with no natural enemies anywhere on the planet, an animal that runs down blue whales and flips great white sharks like coins. It has found you. It turns. For one long second, a 2-ton head swings around, and an eye the size of your fist settles on you. And then it just leaves. It reads you, loses interest, and slides back into the dark. You were the easiest meal in the sea, and it decided you were not a meal at all. In every record we have, across every ocean, no wild orca has ever killed a person. So, why does it spare us? 1. A killing machine with no asterisk. A big male orca runs to around 32 feet long, and the largest bulls can weigh as much as 22,000 pounds. That is the top of the range. A typical male is lighter. In a burst, an orca moves at around 35 miles an hour. Michael Phelps, the fastest human ever to swim, tops out near 6. So the single greatest swimmer our species has ever produced moves at roughly 1/6 the speed of a cruising killer whale. There is no version of this where you outswim it. And it hunts everything. The global killer whale menu runs past 140 species: fish, seals, sea lions, dolphins, sharks, and the largest animal that has ever existed, the blue whale. Nothing in the ocean is above its pay grade. Except, apparently, you. Sit inside the orca's head for a second and see how strange that is. You are slow. No shell, no venom, no armor, no speed. You splash and thrash and broadcast your exact position with every clumsy kick, like a wounded thing ringing a dinner bell. By every rule this animal lives by, you are not a challenge. You are grocery. A soft, loud, helpless snack drifting in the open with a look of growing concern on your face. And it swims past you to go find a fish. Quick thing before we go deeper. Where are you watching from? Drop your nearest coastline in the comments, because the odds are good. A part of these has slid past it at some point, closer to your feet than you would like to think. And if it is some unholy hour where you are right now, lights off, half asleep, you are exactly who the ocean sends this to at 2 a.m. Say hi on your way down. 2. It can see straight through you. An orca does not need light to see you. It sees with sound. It fires a stream of clicks out through its forehead, thousands a second, and reads the echoes coming back. This is echolocation, the same trick a bat uses, scaled up and aimed into the sea. But calling it hearing undersells it. The returning echo does not just tell the orca that something is there. It tells the orca what that something is made of on the inside. Sound slides through soft flesh and bounces hard off two things: bone and air. So when an orca pings a seal, the echo comes back reading fat, a thick, even wall of blubber wrapped around a dense little core, the sonar signature of food. When it pings you, it gets something else. Thin skin over hard, oddly arranged bone, two big pockets of air where your lungs sit. None of the insulating blubber a seal carries. The southern resident orcas of the Pacific Northwest live on Chinook salmon, and they can pick one Chinook out of a mixed school from over 100 meters away. In 1972, off Point Sur in California, a surfer named Hans Kretschmer became one of the only people in recorded history bitten by a wild orca. Black wetsuit, sea lions in the water, churning surf that scrambles sonar. The whale grabbed him, and then, this is the part that matters, it let go almost at once. Be honest with yourself for a moment. When you heard that, did something in your chest loosen a little? Tell me in one word what that landed as. Relief, awe, chills. I read those. And if you are here for the kind of video that gets to the point, tap the like and hype button. 3. The menu is locked, and you are junk food. Here is where it stops being biologue. Orcas have culture, real, inherited, stubborn culture. Off one stretch of coast, you can find two kinds of killer whale that will not touch each other's food. The residents eat fish, basically only fish. The transients eat marine mammals, seals and sea lions and porpoises. They share the same water. They can hear each other. And they do not swap menus, do not mingle, do not interbreed. A resident orca will stay hungry with a fat seal swimming past its face, because a seal is simply not registered in its mind as food. Nobody taught it that a seal was dinner, so a seal is furniture. And that word, taught, is the whole thing. A calf does not decide the menu. Its mother does, and her mother did, handed down the family line, like a recipe nobody is allowed to change. You can watch how hard that rule holds in the saddest way possible. The southern residents are starving. Their Chinook salmon are collapsing. The whales are thin. And in bad years, the calves do not make it through the winter. And still they will not switch to the seals crowding the same water. They would rather go hungry than eat something their culture never labeled a meal. That is how deep the rule runs. A seal is a dense brick of blubber, thousands of calories of pure fuel. You are lean muscle stretched over a rack of bones, wrapped, if you dive or surf, in a rubber suit that is not even edible. An orca brain weighs somewhere between about 5 and 7 kilograms, which makes it the second largest brain of any animal alive, behind only the sperm whale. Yours weighs around 1.4 kilograms. By raw mass, then, an orca carries something like 4 times the brain you do. That does not mean 4 times the intelligence. Size alone is not the same as smarts, and by the ratio of brain to body, a human still comes out ahead. But it is not only the size, it is the wiring. Orca brains carry the same specialized spindle neurons found in humans and great apes, the cells tied to empathy and social awareness, and they sit in a region of the brain linked to feeling that is dramatically enlarged compared with ours. Whatever social emotion is made of, this animal is built to feel a great deal of it. That mind runs the sonar we already met, and the machinery is its own small marvel. The clicks are not made in the mouth. They are made high in the nasal passages by structures called phonic lips, focused and aimed by a lens of fatty tissue in the forehead called the melon, and the echoes return through the lower jaw, of all places, carried through fat straight to the inner ear. The animal essentially hears the world through its chin. It uses that mind to turn darkness into a hunting ground. Orcas usually forage in the top few hundred meters, but tagged whales have been recorded diving to around 480 meters on a single breath. Most dives last 3 to 5 minutes, though the longest on record push past 12. Orcas recognize themselves in mirrors, the classic test for self-awareness. For orcas, the evidence is only suggestive, and scientists have not pinned it down. A brain like that does not just react to the ocean, it thinks ahead of it. And that changes how it hunts. The great white shark, the animal an entire generation was raised to fear. Off South Africa, 2 males, known as port and starboard, named for the way their fins flop to either side, worked out something nobody thought possible. They flip the shark upside down. Turned onto its back, a great white drops into a paralyzed trance called tonic immobility. It powers down like someone hit a switch, unable to fight or flee or even breathe properly. And while it hangs there, the orcas open it with surgical care and take one thing: the liver. Just the liver. A soft organ packed with squalene, the richest fuel in the shark, and they let the rest of the body sink. In June 2023, off Mossel Bay, one of them, starboard, did it entirely alone, killing a great white in under 2 minutes and gliding past the research boat with the liver still in his mouth. After hunts like these, the sharks abandon whole stretches of coastline for months. The most feared predator in the sea felt a bigger one arrive and simply left. Then, off Bremer Bay in Western Australia, pods have been confirmed killing blue whales, both adults and a calf, documented in 2019 and again in 2021, the first time science ever recorded it happening. There is no brute force way to kill something that big, so they do not use force. They use coordination. A dozen orcas take turns ramming and exhausting the whale. And then comes the move that matters. Individuals push up over the blowhole and hold it shut, keeping the giant from breathing. They do not overpower the biggest heart on Earth. They quietly turn its own need for air against it. In the Antarctic, they have a different answer for a different problem. A seal resting on a floating slab of ice looks safe. It is not. A line of orcas will swim at the flow in formation and throw a single coordinated wave across it, sliding the seal off the ice and into the water. They time it together. They read the ice. Only a specialized group of them, maybe 100 animals, even knows how. This is the animal that solved the great white, drowned the blue whale, and built a wave to wash a seal off the ice. It could take you apart with no plan at all. And every day, all over the world, it looks at you and decides not to. But here is the strange part. No orca is born knowing any of this. Somebody has to teach it. Some. 6. Nobody is born knowing this. They get taught. On the beaches of Peninsula Valdez in Argentina, orcas do something that looks like suicide. They drive themselves right up onto the sand to snatch sea lion pups from the shallows, then twist and heave their way back into the water before they strand for good. Get the timing wrong, and the tide leaves you dying on the beach under your own weight. So the mothers teach it, slowly, across years. They nudge their calves onto the slope in safe conditions and let them practice the lunge and the retreat again and again until a young one can gamble its life on a wave and win. Only around a dozen animals on the planet have ever fully mastered it. A family trade, handed down like a dangerous heirloom. And in 2025, a BBC series narrated by David Attenborough caught something never filmed before. Off Bremer Bay, a pod was seen running a drill. One young orca played the part of the prey, while the others rehearsed the exact move they use on a blue whale, surrounding it, holding it, covering its blowhole underwater, and then letting it back up. They were practicing the drowning technique on a volunteer before using it for real, running plays before the game. The teaching builds a whole toolkit. In the fjords of Norway, orcas herd herring into a tight, panicked ball using curtains of bubbles and the flash of their white undersides, then stun dozens of fish at once with a single slap of the tail. It is called carousel feeding, and it is pure cooperation. Not every trick is theirs, mind you. The famous spiral bubble net belongs to humpback whales, not orcas. But what they own completely. and they pass every piece of it down by hand. And a lesson is only as immortal as the family that remembers it. These families talk, and every family talks a little differently. Each pod has its own set of calls, a vocabulary of squeals and pulses it uses to stay together across miles of dark water. Pods that share some of those calls are counted as an acoustic clan, a kind of extended language group. And the calls are not instinct. A calf learns to speak like its mother, picking up her exact accent, the way a child in one town grows up sounding like that town and not the next one over. Move the family across the sea, and the accent moves with it, unchanged, for decades. This is the deeper reason the residents and transients never mix. They do not just eat different food. They do not really understand each other. Same species, same water, and yet two cultures speaking two dialects, passing in the dark like strangers who never learned the other's language. When biologists point to culture in an animal, this is the cleanest example on the planet outside of us. And sometimes, when two familiar pods that have been apart finally meet again, they line up in two facing rows, hold for a moment across the gap. And then break and rush together. Researchers call it a greeting ceremony. Nobody can tell you exactly why. They just seem glad. They play, too. Young orcas will drape strands of kelp over their fins and swim around wearing it, passing the game between them like a fashion nobody voted on. It does nothing. It feeds no one. As far as anyone can tell, it is just fun. In every one of these families, one member matters more than all the rest. And she is almost always the oldest one there. The grandmother, and the mother who would not let go. Here is where the killing machine breaks the frame completely. Orcas are one of only a handful of animals on Earth where the females go through menopause. Human women do it. A few whale species do it. Almost nothing else does. A female orca stops having calves around 40 and then keeps living 20, 30, sometimes 40 more years past the point of reproducing. In evolution, that is bizarre. An animal that can no longer pass on its genes is supposed to fade out. She does the opposite. She becomes the single most important individual in the pod. Decades of memory live in that old female, where the salmon hide in a bad year, which channel still holds fish when the usual ones fail. How the family survived the last time the ocean turned against them. Researchers at the University of Exeter followed hundreds of these whales and found it written in the numbers. calves who lose their grandmother are far more likely to die in the years that follow, the risk jumping several times higher, and the effect is strongest exactly when it counts most, in the lean years, when the salmon run thin and the family needs someone who remembers where to go. When an old female dies, the pod does not just lose a grandmother. It loses a library, burning quietly, with no copy anywhere else. And when that kind of love has nowhere to go, it turns into something that will stay with you. In 2018, a southern resident female named Tahlequah gave birth, and her calf lived about half an hour. She would not let it sink. She balanced her dead newborn on her own head and pushed it through the water, and she kept pushing it for 17 days across more than 1,000 miles, over 1,600 kilometers, while her pod took turns helping carry the body. The world watched a whale in open grief and did not quite have a word for it. Then, at the start of 2025, it happened again. Another calf, a daughter, gone within days. And Tahlequah lifted the small body onto her head and began, once more, to carry it. Ooh, this is the same kind of animal that drowns blue whales, that flips great whites, and takes the liver. That could unmake you in seconds, and does not. It hunts the largest hearts in the ocean, and it carries its dead children across 1,000 miles of it, because it cannot bring itself to put them down. So sit with that, and then tell me. Which one hit you harder? The grandmother who is her family's entire library, or the mother who would not let go? I want to know which one you are still thinking about tonight. 9. Game recognizes game, and the boat's off Iberia. There is a story people love about why orcas leave us alone, and it is worth telling, as long as we are honest that it is a story and not a proven fact. It goes like this. For centuries, humans hunted whales, and orcas would have watched it happen, would have seen boats take their kind, sometimes seen a calf harmed to draw in the rest of the pod. So maybe, the theory says, the memory got passed down, and somewhere in that long cultural memory there is a rule: leave the humans, because we have seen what they can do. Some people call it game recognizing game. It is a haunting idea, and it might even be partly true. But there is no way to test it, and you should file it under hypothesis, not history. What is not a story is Eden in Australia. For nearly a century, up until 1930, a pod of orcas genuinely cooperated with human whalers in Twofold Bay. The orcas herded larger whales into the bay and slapped their tails to alert the men, and in exchange, under an arrangement the whalers called the Law of the Tongue, the orcas got first claim on the lips and tongue of the carcass. Their leader, a male called Old Tom, was real. His skeleton still hangs in the Eden Killer Whale Museum. That partnership between our species and theirs actually happened. Since the summer of 2020, off Spain and Portugal, a small group of orcas has been interfering with boats, specifically the rudders of sailing yachts. As of 2025, there are more than 700 recorded interactions, hundreds of damaged vessels, and a handful of boats actually sunk. In all of it, across every one of those encounters, not one person in the water has ever been harmed. Boats break. People never do. When a yacht goes down, the orcas ignore the humans bobbing right beside it. Scientists who gathered in 2024 to make sense of the behavior concluded it is almost certainly not an attack and not revenge, but something more like a fad, a game spreading through a group of bored young whales, probably started by a single female nicknamed White Gladys. There is even a quieter theory that the boats are simply too loud and the whales are silencing a nuisance. Whatever it is, the pattern holds the same line every wild orca holds. Wreck the machine if you like. Never touch the person. There is exactly one place on Earth where an orca has ever taken a human life, and it is not the open sea. 10. The only place it kills us. Every human ever killed by an orca died in a tank. The most famous of them was an animal named Tilikum. He was taken from the ocean off Iceland in 1983, when he was about 2 years old, and he spent the rest of his life in concrete pools. Over the years, he was involved in the deaths of 3 people. A trainer named Kelty Byrne in 1991, a man who slipped into his pool in 1999, and the trainer, Dawn Brancheau, in 2010. 3 human lives from one captive whale, and he never ate them. This was not hunting. A wild orca kills to feed with precision and files us under the wrong echo. Tilikum killed the way a mind comes apart. A creature built to swim 100 miles a day and speak to a family that spanned the sea, folded into a box where his own sonar bounced off the walls and came back at him like his own voice in a closed room. You can read what captivity does written on their bodies. In tanks, essentially every adult male orca ends up with a collapsed dorsal fin, that proud tower folded flat over the side. In the wild, it happens to fewer than 1 in 100. The animal we broke is not the animal in the sea. And the animal in the sea keeps showing us who it actually is, if we bother to look. Off northern Norway, divers slip into freezing water in the middle of orcas hunting herring by the thousand, and the whales simply work around them, scanning the divers with sonar and gliding past, the way you would step around a lamppost. And in 2025, scientists published something almost tender. Dozens of documented cases gathered over 20 years of wild orcas approaching people and trying to hand them food. A fish, a bird, a piece of a seal offered up to a human on a boat or in the water. And then the whale would wait, watching to see what we would do. the apex predator of the entire ocean, holding out a gift, checking whether we understood. So here is where all of it lands. We spend fortunes and lifetimes scanning the sky for a second intelligence, some alien mind that might one day look back at us and choose not to destroy us. And the whole time, that mind has been swimming underneath our boats. It has a brain built for feeling, a language older than any of ours, a memory carried by its grandmothers, and the raw power to end us on any afternoon it likes. It looked at us and read us and decided we were not worth the harm. The strongest hunter in the ocean chose restraint. We named it the killer whale. It has spent its entire existence proving it is something closer to a neighbor. The question was never really why it refuses to kill us. The question is what it says about us that we assumed it would. And if a mind like that unsettles you because it sits too close to our own, there is one more waiting further down. The sperm whale carries the largest brain that has ever existed on this planet, and it spends that brain diving into a black the killer whale itself will not enter, a mile straight down, into the one darkness the ocean's deadliest predator is afraid of. That is where we go next. By every rule you knows, the floor of the deep sea should be empty. It is pitch dark down here, near freezing. The pressure alone enough to crush bone, and almost nothing falls this far to eat. Then one thing lands on the cold mud and turns it into the most crowded life in the abyss, feeding it not for days, but for more than 50 years. It is a dead whale, a whale fall. And in the deepest trenches, some of these skeletons have lain exposed for 5.3 million years and still have not dissolved. One, a feast in a desert of starvation across most of the deep sea. Nearly everything alive depends on a single, meager food supply called marine snow. It is a slow, endless drift of dead plankton, scraps, and waste, sinking down from the sunlit water far above and settling like a fine sediment on the bottom. It never stops falling, but there is very little of it. Below 1,000 meters, the water stays 2 to 4 degrees above freezing all year round. This is the abyss in the truest sense, a cold, lightless desert where most life scrapes by on crumbs, year after year. The animals that manage to live down here are experts at surviving on almost nothing, their whole biology tuned to a diet of drifting dust. For them, a year without a windfall is just an ordinary year. Then a whale dies. Its body sinks, and in a place where food arrives one flake at a time, the arrival of a whole carcass is an event on a scale nothing down here is built for. Scientists who study these falls have measured what that means. A single 40-ton whale settles onto roughly 50 square meters of mud. In doing so, they estimate it delivers about as much organic carbon as that patch of floor would normally receive from 2,000 years of marine snow. 2,000 years of food dropped in a single afternoon. That one number changes everything. To the scattered animals living out their slow lives on that cold plain, it is the difference between a lifetime of famine and a banquet that will outlast most of them. A single corpse can feed an entire community on the spot for decades, turning a barren stretch of seafloor into an isolated island of life. A crowded oasis in the middle of nothing. But the whale does not merely arrive intact and wait to be eaten. Before it ever reached this depth, it had already been torn apart once, up at the surface. What country are you listening from, and what time is it there? Off your nearest coast, out in the dark, an island of life like this one may be forming on the seafloor at this very moment. A whale that dies at the surface rarely sinks straight away. As its body begins to break down, gases build up inside it and hold it afloat, and for a while it becomes a feast for a very different crowd. Sharks tearing at it from below, seabirds working it from above. By the time those gases finally escape and the body loses its buoyancy, a good part of it is already gone. Only then does it sink for real, and it has to fall a long way. A carcass that comes to rest in shallow water is merely carrion, picked over and forgotten within days. But when a whale settles below roughly a kilometer into the cold and the crushing dark, it becomes something with its own name and its own strange afterlife. It becomes a whale fall. What happens next is not one process, but four. A single whale fall moves through 4 successive stages, and each stage feeds a completely different community of creatures. The animals that arrive first are long gone before the ones that arrive last appear at all. In effect, one corpse becomes 4 separate worlds, each rising and fading in turn. A crab that flourishes during the second stage would find nothing to eat in the first, and would be long dead before the third. Every community is tuned to a different version of the same body, and each world runs on its own clock. Biologists compare the whole sequence to ecological succession, the way life slowly colonizes and transforms a newly formed island. Except here, the island is a body. The first stage is measured in months. The last stretches across decades. To understand how a dead whale can stay busy with life for half a century, you have to follow it down through all 4. There is something quietly moving about that idea, that one ending can become 4 beginnings. If it makes you feel that too, just leave a single word in the comments: beginnings. So, who arrives first? At this depth, it is not what you would expect. A fresh carcass is a rare jackpot, and the animals that live off these falls have to sense one from a great distance and race in before the food runs out. They are remarkably good at it. Within hours of a whale reaching the bottom, the first wave arrives out of the surrounding dark. They come as sleeper sharks, nearly 7 meters long, rat-tail fish with their whip-thin bodies, eel-like hagfish, and swarms of amphipods, small shrimp-like scavengers that pore over the carcass in their thousands. They come from far beyond the reach of any light, drawn in by the scent of decay bleeding out into the slow currents. To find one meal like this in a lifetime of famine, an animal has to be built to travel. Some of these scavengers can go months, even years, between meals, then gorge until they can barely swim away. A whale fall is not just food to them. It is the single event their entire existence is shaped around. And they eat fast. Together, this mobile crew strips something like 40 to 60 kilograms of flesh every single day. At that rate, a carcass the size of a bus can be reduced to bare bone in a matter of months. The soft body of the largest animal that has ever lived, gone in a season. But on a starving seafloor, even the stripped skeleton is not waste. The feast is not ending. It is barely beginning. And if a 7-meter shark, racing through total darkness toward a body it can smell but never see, has your attention by now, do the deep a small favor and hit the hype button. It genuinely helps the algorithm carry stories like this one further down into the dark, to the next curious person. And one of those first arrivals, the hagfish, feeds in a way that raises a strange question of its own. How do you tear flesh from a body when you have no jaw to bite with? The hagfish has a genuinely odd answer. It has no jaw, so it cannot bite in the ordinary sense. Instead, it clamps onto the carcass with a rasping, tooth-lined mouth, then ties its own body into a simple overhand knot and slides that knot forward along itself, pressing hard against the flesh for leverage. The moving loop gives it the force it needs to wrench free the toughest, most stubborn scrap. It looks unsettling, but it is not the work of a monster. It is an elegant fix for a hard problem: how to strip meat from bone when evolution never handed you jaws. The hagfish does not dine alone. Alongside it, hundreds to thousands of isopods settle over the skeleton in a dense living crust. These are armored relatives of the deep-sea giant isopod, a creature that can grow larger than a human hand, and they swarm the bones like marine insects, cleaning away the last shreds of tissue. The cleanup crew of a whale fall is strange in both shape and sheer number. Together, they form a kind of demolition team, each species taking on the part of the job its body is built for, until the whale is reduced to a bare frame of bone. Nothing here goes to waste. and nothing here works alone. But this army is not unbeatable. Under certain conditions on the floor of a deep trench, a skeleton can hold together longer than the scavengers can take it apart. Hold on to that detail. It comes back later to answer a far larger mystery. Why a rare handful of these skeletons survive not for years, but for millions of them. In only a few months, the mobile crew has stripped away every trace of flesh and fat, leaving nothing but bare bone on cold mud. And the moment the meat runs out, an entirely different kind of life begins to move in. With the flesh gone, a quieter and much smaller crowd takes over. Biologists call this the enrichment stage. Worms, crustaceans, snails, small octopuses, and eel pouts comb through every centimeter of sediment around the skeleton, mining the scraps of tissue and fat that soaked into the mud during the first frenzy. This phase is slow, patient work, and it lasts well over a year. And the sheer density of life here is hard to overstate. In the enriched sediment around a single whale fall, small polychaete worms can carpet the seabed at up to 45,000 individuals per square meter. Picture that for a moment. A thick, living rug spread across the floor of a place that is otherwise one of the emptiest environments on Earth. Every strand of it fed by one death. To put that in perspective, it is tens of thousands of animals crowded into a stretch of seabed you could cover with a bath towel, in a place where a square meter of ordinary floor might hold only a handful. This is not a simulation or an artist's impression. In 2019, the exploration vessel Nautilus filmed a real whale fall on Davidson Seamount, off the coast of California, at a depth of 3,240 meters. When the team returned to the exact same spot a year later, in 2020, the scene had changed almost beyond recognition. The carcass had already moved into its third stage, and the scavengers had thinned right out. Across 2 visits, they had caught time itself passing over a single body. By now, the soft tissue is spent. What remains is bare bone lying on cold mud, and by every reasonable expectation, this is where the feast should quietly end. Instead, the next stage is the strangest of them all, because something down here has found a way to eat the skeleton itself. For most of a whale fall's long life, the bones look finished, picked clean, gray, motionless on the mud, a skeleton and nothing more. But this third phase, which scientists call the sulfophilic stage, is by far the longest of all 4. It can last 50 years or more. And through every one of those decades, the bone that appears completely dead is in fact housing a hidden community. one that is slowly draining the very last of the whale. What it drains is not flesh. The flesh vanished long ago. It is lipids, the fats still locked deep inside the porous structure of the bone itself, out of reach of everything that came before. Bacteria work their way into the bone and begin breaking those fats down, tapping an energy source the scavengers could never touch. This is part of why the stage lasts so long. The fat sealed inside a large whale's bones is an enormous reserve, and the bacteria draw it down slowly, a little at a time, stretching a single animal's death across a human lifetime. And as they feed, they release something remarkable. Their waste product is hydrogen sulfide, the gas that gives rotten eggs their smell and a substance that is lethal to nearly every living thing. It bleeds out of the bone and seeps as far as 8 feet, nearly 2.5 meters, into the surrounding sediment, soaking the mud around the skeleton in toxic chemistry. Here is where the paradox turns over. That poison does not sterilize the seafloor, it feeds it. Around the bones rises a whole community that eats no flesh at all and instead runs on chemicals, pale mats of bacteria, clams, mussels, and worms, all thriving on a gas that is deadly to us. How can a toxin become the foundation of an entire ecosystem? The answer rewrites what you thought every living thing needs in order to survive. On land, nearly every food chain you can name begins with the sun. Plants capture sunlight through photosynthesis, and everything else either eats the plants or eats the animals that ate the plants. Down here, in absolute darkness, where sunlight has never once reached, the bacteria around the bones do something that sounds impossible. They pull their energy straight out of chemistry itself, feeding on the hydrogen sulfide leaking from the whale. The process is called chemosynthesis, and it works like a second sun built from poison instead of light. Consider what that means. An entire, thriving ecosystem here is powered by a toxin, with no sunlight involved at any step of the way. It is life built on rules our own bodies could never follow, written in a language we are not equipped to read. And here is a fact very few people know. Before whale falls were confirmed in 1987, science recognized only 2 places on the entire planet where life ran completely on chemosynthesis: hydrothermal vents and sunken wood. A whale fall turned out to be the 3rd such world ever found. Every large carcass that sinks into the dark becomes its own chemical oasis, and it needs no vent and no undersea volcano to build one. It needs only a skeleton and the dark around it. That single fact quietly widened the map of where life can exist. If a sunken skeleton is enough to build a world on chemistry alone, then the deep sea may be dotted with far more of these hidden oases than anyone once dared to assume. But of all the strange creatures that gather at this oasis, one stopped scientists cold the first time they laid eyes on it. It had no eyes, no mouth, no stomach of any kind. And somehow, against every expectation, it was feeding on solid bone. That creature is Osedax, the bone-eating worm, sometimes called the zombie worm. It has no eyes, no mouth, and no gut, so at first glance, it should not be able to eat anything at all. What it has instead is a branching root system that it drives down into the bone. Those roots secrete acid that dissolves the mineral of the skeleton, and symbiotic bacteria living inside the roots break down the collagen and fat as they are freed. In other words, Osedax digests a whale from the outside in, absorbing its meal through its skin rather than any mouth. The acid trick is stranger than it sounds, only until you learn where else it happens. It works much the way your own kidneys pump acid to balance your blood, except Osedax turns that same chemistry onto the bone of an animal millions of times its size. The bacteria in its roots were also the first case science ever documented of microbes digesting lipids inside a partnership like this. Then there is the detail that stunned researchers most: how it breeds. In most Osedax species, the males are microscopic. They live as dwarfs inside the jelly-like tube around the female, never touching bone, existing only to fertilize her eggs. In some species, a single female carries a harem of more than 600 of these tiny males at once. Since the first Osedax was described in 2004, scientists have identified 32 species, living anywhere from 10 meters down to 4,000, an entire branch of life devoted to a single resource: bone, resting on the seafloor. Everything so far has been about one corpse feeding life for 50 years and then dissolving into the mud. But in the deepest trenches, some whale skeletons have lain exposed for 5.3 million years without dissolving at all. For the bone-eating army we have just met, that should be impossible. For all its isolation, a whale fall may be quietly wired into the rest of the ocean. Scientists have proposed that these carcasses act as evolutionary stepping stones. The idea is that the larvae of chemosynthetic species, the same lineages that live at hydrothermal vents and cold seeps, use whale falls as staging posts. They drift from one to the next and adapt as they go, rather than crossing the vast, empty seafloor in a single impossible leap. For that to work, the stepping stones have to sit close enough together, and they seem to. Researchers estimate that large whale carcasses come to rest, on average, only about 5 to 16 kilometers apart along the routes where whales migrate. That is near enough for microscopic larvae to drift from one fall to another before their tiny energy reserves run dry. A chain of islands laid out across the dark. Yet each of those islands is mostly a world of its own. Of the roughly 200 sulfur-loving species found at whale falls, only 10 to 20% also turn up at vents or seeps. The great majority live nowhere else on Earth. A dead whale does not merely borrow life from other places. It generates a community found only here, on the bones of the dead. That distinction matters. It means the ocean floor is not one uniform desert with a few identical oases, but a scattered archipelago of unique little worlds, each seeded by a death and shaped by the particular bones it grew upon. Which leads to a larger thought. If a single carcass can feed life for half a century, seed new species, and help stitch an ocean together, then what happens when thousands of them come to rest in the very same place over millions of years? 10. The graveyard that time forgot. In June 2026, the journal Nature reported the discovery of an enormous whale graveyard in the Diamantina zone, off the southeastern Indian Ocean. It sits between 4,616 and 7,001 meters down, and it runs for roughly 1,200 kilometers along the floor of the trench. This is not a scattering of bones. It is a boneyard on a geological scale. Across it, researchers logged 476 fossilized whale skeletons, packed at a density reaching 759.5 individuals for every square kilometer. The oldest, dated using strontium isotopes locked inside the bone, have been lying there for at least 5.3 million years. How do any bones survive that long? But it is not the answer you would guess. These skeletons did not outrun the bone eaters. The Nature team found Osedax still hard at work, even at 7 kilometers down. What preserves the bones is the trench itself. Sediment settles here so slowly that the skeletons stay exposed on the surface rather than being buried or dissolved, and they lie there long enough to gradually turn to stone. The dense, heavy snout bones of beaked whales resist decay especially well, holding their form while they fossilize. The landscape does the rest. The V-shaped troughs of the Diamantina zone act like a funnel, sweeping drifting carcasses down onto the same stretch of trench floor. The whales did not choose this place to rest, as appealing as that image might be. The terrain quietly gathers them, so that instead of scattering thinly across the seabed, they collect into a single graveyard. In this one place, fossils millions of years old, carcasses still decaying, and animals feeding right now all lie together at once. It is a fossil bed that is still alive, still adding fresh pages every day. Death here is not something safely in the past. It is a present that never stops arriving. And there is a very human reason these graveyards are quietly shrinking. There is one link in this story that is easy to miss. A whale fall depends on a whale dying, which means it depends, in the end, on how many whales are alive to begin with. And that number changed. According to researchers, the industrial hunting of whales across the 19th and 20th centuries reduced the world's great whale populations by at least 2/3, with some estimates running as high as 90%. In a single era, the ocean lost most of its largest animals. The effects reach all the way down to the seafloor. Fewer whales dying means fewer bodies sinking into the dark. Which means fewer whale falls, and so the habitat of an entire group of specialized creatures begins to contract. By one estimate for the North Atlantic, somewhere between 30 and 50% of the species that live only on whale falls may now be at risk of disappearing. And because there is a long delay between the cause and its full effect, scientists suggest that some of these specialists may still be slipping away right now, quietly, long after that era ended. They call it an extinction debt, a loss already set in motion but not yet fully paid. It is the kind of change that is almost invisible from the surface. Nothing dramatic happens on any single day. The specialists just run low on the bodies they were built to inherit. There is a recent, real hint of it. After 10 years of watching whale remains off British Columbia, a research team reported in 2025 that they had not found a single Osedax at Barkley Canyon. Even the bone-eater that once seemed impossible to erase may be thinning out. The full consequence may still be unfolding right now on the seafloor, where no one is there to see it. Come back, finally, to where we began. By every rule we know, the floor of the deep sea should be a desert of death. And yet we have watched a single death do the exact opposite of ending things. One whale falls, and it starts 4 worlds in succession, feeds life for half a century, seeds species found nowhere else, and leaves behind a layer of stone, still telling its story 5 million years later. Down here, the line between life and death is turned inside out. The death of one of the largest animals on Earth is not a full stop. It is an opening line, written for the thousands of lives that could not exist without it. And Diamantina is almost certainly not the only graveyard of its kind. In theory, many more stretches of the deep ocean meet the same conditions, waiting in the dark, and we have never yet gone down to look. We have mapped the surface of the moon in finer detail than the floor of our own sea. From the density they measured in that one zone, researchers estimate the Diamantina Trench alone may cradle more than 10 million whale skeletons gathered across geological time. And that is a single graveyard, in a single trench, in an ocean we have barely begun to explore. Every one of those skeletons was once an animal that lived, and then, in dying, handed its body forward to a whole chain of life it would never see. Multiply that by 10 million, and the graveyard starts to look less like an ending and more like an engine. So here is the thought to carry back up with you. If one death, in the coldest and darkest place on the planet, can give rise to this much life, then how much of what we assume about death on the ocean floor have we gotten exactly backward? 3,300 feet down, on the floor of the Gulf of Mexico, a crab is walking across the dark. It moves the way crabs have always moved, sideways and patient, feeling its way over the mud, with legs that have carried it through total blackness its entire life. There is no sunlight here. The crab does not miss it. Then the ground in front of it changes. The mud gives way to something flat and still and faintly bright, a surface that catches the lights of a passing robot and throws them back like polished glass. Within seconds, the body locks up. The legs that were so certain a moment ago fold in on themselves. The crab tips over at the waterline, and it goes still. It will stay there. Perfectly shaped, perfectly preserved, and it is not alone. Other bodies lie around it in the same frozen pose. A real one, with a beach and a surface and slow waves that roll toward you when something disturbs it, sitting at the bottom of the sea, with the entire weight of the ocean pressing down on top of it. Sailors and scientists have a name for places like this: brine pools, underwater lakes, seas inside a sea. This is one of the strangest places on the planet, and it is closer than the deep sea has any right to be, not on some distant moon, but a few hundred miles off the coast of Texas and Louisiana, an alien world right here on Earth. Step back from the water's edge just a little, and the seafloor around the lake is not barren at all. It is crowded, crawling. One of the densest gatherings of life anywhere in the deep ocean presses right up against the rim of a thing that kills on contact. A graveyard and a garden sharing the same beach. Why does a lake at the bottom of the sea kill almost everything that touches it? How is it that life doesn't just survive next to that lake, in complete darkness, with no sunlight to run on? It thrives there, harder than almost anywhere else down deep. And the question that keeps the scientists coming back with their robots and their lights: what else is living along these shores that we have never seen and may not have even named yet? The story of how that lake got there starts around 170 million years ago. It's great to have you here. Comment your location so I can see where we're connecting from. You are looking at a body of water, resting inside another body of water. with a clear line between them. The lake is brine, seawater loaded with so much dissolved salt that it becomes dramatically heavier than the ordinary seawater around it. This brine is so much denser than the sea above that the two simply refuse to mix. The heavy water sinks, settles into any low spot on the seafloor, and pools there, and a sharp boundary forms at the top where the dense layer meets the lighter ocean. That boundary is your shoreline. That is the surface of the lake. It is not water against air. It is heavy water against lighter water, holding a line so crisp it looks solid. And these underwater lakes are fed the way a real lake is fed. Beneath them, buried layers of salt keep dissolving, and that briny water keeps seeping up to refill the pool, sometimes spilling over the lowest edge of the rim and running off downhill as a current, an underwater river, even an underwater waterfall, water pouring through water. The largest known brine pool in the Gulf, a basin called Orca Basin, sprawls across roughly 47 square miles, more than twice the size of Manhattan Island, a buried lake of poison, the area of a city lying under nearly 8,000 feet of ocean. And brine pools are not only a Gulf of Mexico oddity, and brine pools are not only a Gulf of Mexico oddity. Scientists have found them in the Red Sea, in the Mediterranean, off Antarctica. But nowhere are they gathered as thickly or studied as closely as in the Gulf, which makes this stretch of seafloor one of the best windows we have into how the deep ocean breaks its own rules. If you find this content valuable, give the video a hype. It's the simplest way to support the channel and help us keep making more videos like this. So the lake is real, the shoreline is real, the waterfall is real. Where does that much salt come from? Sitting at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. Wind the clock back to the Jurassic, around 170 million years ago, when the dinosaurs were still early in their long reign and the map of the world would be unrecognizable to you. The Gulf of Mexico was just beginning to tear open as the continents pulled apart. And for a while, it was a shallow, half-enclosed sea, cut off from the wider ocean and sitting under a hot sky. Cut off and baking, that sea did what shallow water does in heat. It evaporated. And as it dried, it left its salt behind. Again and again, over a vast span of time, until the bottom of the young Gulf was layered with a bed of salt thousands of feet thick. Geologists call it the Luan Salt, and it is still down there, the buried memory of an ocean that dried out. Then time did what time does. Rivers poured sediment into the Gulf for over 100 million years, burying that salt bed under heavy layers of mud and sand. You might assume the salt got crushed and squeezed up by the sheer weight of all that sediment pressing on it. That is not really it. The deeper truth is stranger. Salt is light. It is less dense than the packed rock and sediment piling on top of it, and over geological time, salt under pressure does not behave like a brittle solid. It slowly flows, like a tremendously stiff fluid. Being lighter than the rock above, it does what anything lighter does when it is trapped underneath something heavier. It tries to rise. It pushes up in slow plumes and domes and towering columns that geologists call salt diapirs, forcing their way up through the layers above across millions of years. As those salt domes shoulder upward, they crack the rock around them. Seawater works its way down into those cracks, reaches the salt, and dissolves it into intensely concentrated brine. That brine, now heavy and saturated, seeps back up to the seafloor and collects in the low spots, and there is your lake. Every underwater lake in the Gulf is the surface end of this slow machinery, a pipeline running down to a salt bed laid by a sea that vanished before the first bird existed. The shoreline the crab died on was 170 million years in the making. You can even read the chemistry on the lake itself. The pale gray crust that rings many of these pools and sometimes coats the bodies trapped in them is largely barium sulfate, minerals dropping out of the brine, and on the floor of some pools, the salt rebuilds itself into crystals you could hold, cubes of halite, plain table salt, growing in the dark at the bottom of the sea. It is a beautiful piece of machinery, this lake built by a dead ocean and a rising mountain of salt. But there is something the beauty hides. Everything that touches this water dies. Here is what would happen to you if you could stand on that shoreline in a suit that held back the pressure and lowered a hand into the lake. The water would be saturated salt, 4 or 5 times saltier than the sea, in some pools far more. It would be almost completely without oxygen. And it would be loaded with 2 of the more dangerous compounds in the natural world. Hydrogen sulfide, the gas that gives rotten eggs their smell and, in enough concentration, shuts down an animal's ability to use oxygen at all. And methane, bubbling up out of the seabed and through the brine. The extreme salt, the absence of oxygen, the toxic gases, they overwhelm a small animal almost at once. That is why the crab locked up within seconds. It did not drown in any way you would recognize. And then the lake does something genuinely eerie. It keeps the bodies. In ordinary seawater, a dead animal is taken apart fast. Scavengers find it, bacteria break it down, and within days it is gone. But the brine that kills these animals is also nearly free of the oxygen and the decomposers that drive normal decay. So the bodies do not rot the way they should. They stay, curled, intact, slowly crusted in pale minerals, preserved far longer than they ever could be on the open seafloor a few feet away. No air, no light, no way back out for whatever wanders in. By every reasonable expectation, the ground around a lake like this should be as empty as the lake itself. A dead zone wrapped around a dead lake. So why is the edge of this killer the most crowded real estate in the deep? Down here, microscopic life evolved to do chemically what plants do with light. Instead of photosynthesis, they run chemosynthesis, pulling energy straight out of those toxic chemicals and using it to build the sugars that feed everything else. And it is not only bacteria doing this. A great deal of it is carried out by archaea, a whole separate branch of microscopic life, as ancient as anything on Earth, and, oddly, more closely related to you than the bacteria are. Together, these microbes do the job the sun does up top. They are the base of the entire food chain here, the first link, the thing that makes a city possible on the shore of a poison lake. And once you understand that, you start to see this pattern everywhere the deep ocean does something impossible. The scalding chimneys of hydrothermal vents, glowing on the seafloor where the planet's heat leaks through, same trick, chemosynthesis. The slow feast that grows on a dead whale's bones after it sinks, same trick again. Life keeps finding the thin line between something deadly and something that can be eaten and setting up shop right on it. The brine pool is just the most vivid version, a buffet running off the fumes of a grave. So the poison is the foundation, the microbes are the farmers, and the creatures that figured out how to live off them did not just survive at the edge of the lake. They built something there, a whole community pressed up against the water that kills, an entire town on the shore of the deadliest pool in the sea. Thousands of them packed shell to shell in a dense band that traces the shoreline like a tide mark, so thick in places that you cannot see the seabed under them. These are deep-sea mussels. In the Gulf, the common species goes by the name Bathymodiolus childressi. Inside their gills, in specialized cells, they farm colonies of those chemosynthetic bacteria. The mussel breathes in the methane, and the toxic chemicals seeping from the lake delivers them to its tenant microbes, and the microbes, in return, make food the mussel lives on. It is a partnership written into the animal's body. The mussel offers shelter and a steady supply of poison gas. The bacteria pay rent in sugar. Neither could do it alone. And the deal lets these mussels carpet a patch of the seafloor that, by every rule we learn at the surface, should be lethal. Where the mussels go, a whole town follows. Tube worms stand in pale clusters with feathery red tips. Squat lobsters and shrimp pick through the mussel beds. Snails graze the bacterial mats. Eelpoutfish hang in the water nearby, and now and then a larger visitor cruises through, a crab, an octopus, to hunt the residents. From a barren plain of dark mud, you arrive at a sudden oasis, denser with life than almost anything for miles in any direction. An oasis the size of a city block, glowing in the robot's lights, built on the only patch of seafloor for miles that happens to be leaking lunch. And there is one more thing the mussels are doing, something you would never guess from looking at them. And it turns out to be the quiet heart of this whole story. They are not just living beside the lake, they are holding it together. The dense band of mussels armors the rim, helping keep the heavy brine where it belongs and the wall of the lake intact. A barrier of living animals standing guard around the very thing that would kill them if it ever broke loose. Look closely at those pale tube worms standing in clusters around the seep. and you are looking at one of the longest-lived animals on the planet. They do not look like much. Slim white tubes, soft red plumes at the tip, swaying slightly in the current. But run the numbers on them, and they stop being scenery. A Gulf tube worm, called Lamellibrachia louismessi, grows to more than 6 feet tall, and it does it almost unimaginably slowly. To reach that height takes somewhere between 170 and 250 years. A related cold seep worm in the Gulf, Escarpia laminata, routinely lives 1 to 200 years, and a study published in 2017 found individuals that appear to be older than 300. 3 centuries standing in the same dark spot on the seafloor, in water that never warms and never lightens. And the tube worms are not even the strangest residents. In 1997, on a research cruise in the Gulf, scientists led by the biologist Charles Fisher pulled up something nobody expected. About 1,800 feet down, they found a mound of methane hydrate, a kind of flammable ice that forms when methane freezes together with water under cold, high-pressure conditions. Burning ice, basically. And the entire surface of it was crawling with small, flat pink worms, an inch or 2 long, that nobody had ever seen before. They named the new species the methane iceworm, first as Hesiocaca methanicola, later reclassified as Cercoe methanicola, and watched it do something out of a fever dream. The worms were paddling across the ice on rows of little appendages, grazing the bacteria that grow on the frozen methane, making a living on a slab of fuel at the bottom of the sea. And the pools and their 300-year residents are not even the strangest thing erupting from this seafloor. That is what these lakes really are, in the end. Not a curiosity, a rehearsal. 2 of the places we most suspect could hold life beyond Earth. Jupiter's moon Europa and Saturn's moon Enceladus are ice-covered worlds with liquid oceans underneath, oceans that may well have warm, chemical-rich seafloors of their own. If anything lives there, it will not be living on sunlight. It will be doing what the microbes around these brine pools already do, pulling a living straight out of the chemistry of the rock, in the dark, exactly the way life learned to do it down here. The shore of a poison lake in the Gulf may be the closest thing we have to a window onto another world's ocean. The deep sea looks like the most alien place imaginable, and it is. But every alien thing about it is just life solving the same problems we are afraid of. The dark, the cold, the pressure, the poison, the long stretch of time. A graveyard that keeps turning back into a garden. The strangeness was never the point. The point is that the line between a place that kills and a place that's full of life turns out to be almost no line at all, just a shoreline, barely an inch or 2 wide, where everything happens. We have mapped less of our own seafloor in real detail than we have the surface of the moon. And every time we send a robot down to one of these lakes, it comes back with something we did not know was there. That is a shoreline of its own, and it is worth standing on next. At the edge of the Antarctic ice, a long, flat head breaks the surface. It shows almost nothing at first, just 2 nostrils and a pair of dark eyes, resting so low in the water that the body stays hidden. Then the mouth comes into view, and the corners of it curl upward into something that looks exactly like a smile. It seems to be grinning at you. But that expression is not a greeting. It is the face of a hunter an entire continent has learned to move around, and it belongs to the leopard seal, the apex predator of Antarctica. The strange part is not that the ocean fears it. The strange part is why. A leopard seal does not chase its meals across the open sea. It waits. It hangs, almost fully submerged, at the exact crack in the ice where a penguin must enter the water. And it turns that one point of exit into a trap with no second door. The penguins on the ice above are not afraid of a fair race. They are afraid of the single moment they have no choice but to leave the ice, the moment the hunter has already positioned itself for. The seal has done the math on that gap in the ice, and it has parked itself exactly where the numbers say the prey must appear. There is no clever escape from a doorway you are forced to walk through. It is not the pursuit that terrifies. It is the ambush waiting at the only way out. A leopard seal does not have the tearing teeth of a true meat-eater, and it has no hands to hold its prey down. So it kills with raw force instead. It seizes the animal, and then it thrashes, whipping the prey back and forth against the surface of the water, striking it again and again until the body comes apart. With a penguin, it takes the bird by the feet first, then shakes it so violently against the surface that the skin is torn loose, leaving the feathers and bones behind and taking only the softer parts. Take a second and notice where you are right now. Maybe it's late. Maybe you're under a warm blanket. Maybe the nearest ice to you is the cubes in a glass across the room. You are about as far from that lethal crack in the Antarctic ice as a person can be. So I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? And what time is it where you are? Drop your city and the hour in the comments. Then come stand at the ice edge with me, because the weapon that does the killing is stranger than the kill. 2. A jaw built by two opposite jobs. When a leopard seal opens wide, the way a dentist opens a mouth to check the teeth, the distance from the tip of its upper jaw to the tip of its lower jaw measures around 30 centimeters. That is a mouth that opens like a spring-loaded trap, closing on prey under the ice, in a place where you can barely see anything at all. And when it moves in on something, it often does not lunge or snarl to intimidate. It simply parts its jaws. For a mouth that size, the simple act of opening is already the warning. But that jaw, it was built to do two completely opposite things inside the same mouth. The front of the mouth is pure predator. The canines and the incisors are there to grab and hold warm-blooded prey. The penguins, the seal pups, the fur seals, the same teeth doing the seizing in that thrashing kill. Yet move to the back of the jaw, to the cheek teeth, and you find something that has no business being there at all. Each of those teeth carries 3 large cusps, and they interlock with the teeth above and below to form a comb. 1 mouth, 2 jobs that seem to belong to 2 entirely different animals. And that comb exists to do a thing you would never expect from a killer this cold. If someone said leopard seal, you pictured something round, whiskered, and basically harmless, flopping around on the ice, a big, friendly sea puppy. Right? Almost everyone does. If that was you too, leave a single penguin in the comments. 3. The apex predator that eats plankton. That comb is for filtering krill. The leopard seal draws a whole cloud of the tiny crustaceans into its mouth in a rush of water, then pushes the water back out through the gaps in those interlocking teeth, holding the krill behind. The same basic trick a baleen whale uses to feed. The menu shifts so far with the seasons that there is no floor to it. Some months it feasts on fur seals and penguins. Some months it does almost nothing but filter krill. Data gathered between 2013 and 2017 found penguins could account for up to 46% of the diet of females in summer, and fur seals up to 38%, though the exact numbers depend on how you measure them. That flexibility is what makes it dangerous in an unusual way. It does not need to be hungry to hunt, and it is not locked into a single kind of prey. If that just rewired how you think about what an apex predator even is, that reaction is the whole point of this channel. Hit the like button right now while the shock is still fresh. It tells the algorithm to show this to the next person who thinks they already know what a seal is. Now, back to the giant behind it all. Four, bigger than you think, and the females rule. An average female runs about 3 meters long and weighs around 370 kilograms. The larger ones can pass 3.5 meters and tip over 500 kilograms, roughly the mass of an adult male Kodiak bear, except this one is driving through the water. It is the second largest seal in Antarctica, behind only the southern elephant seal. But unlike the elephant seal, it is the only one in its group that specializes in hunting warm-blooded prey. In most large predators, the male is the giant. Here, it is the reverse. In this species, the females are the bigger sex. By weight, they outsize the males by roughly 50%. An average female near 454 kilograms against a male near 302. That is one of the most extreme cases of female skewed body size in any marine mammal. Five, hunting blind, in the dark, under the ice. 5. The leopard seal has no external ears, and in the black water beneath the ice, its eyes are close to useless. Yet none of that saves the animals it hunts. It sees with its whiskers, reading the faint swirls of water that a swimming body leaves behind long after that body has passed. We can measure just how good this sense is in its close relatives, the wider family of seals. Every fish that swims, every penguin that kicks, leaves behind it a faint wake, a trail of tiny turbulences hanging in the water for seconds after the animal has gone. To us, that trail is invisible and unreachable. To a seal's whiskers, it is a set of footprints. Scientists have shown that a seal, even when blindfolded, can track down prey from as far as 40 meters away using nothing but those whiskers to read the moving water. It is like seeing by touch, in total darkness. The prey does not have to be seen. It only has to have been there. For the leopard seal that turns the black water under the ice from a hiding place into a map. Put that together with the ambush at the ice edge, and you understand why the prey has nowhere left to run. Hide in the dark, and the whiskers still find you. Hold your breath and dive deep, and the swirl of water trailing off your own tail gives away your position anyway. The escape routes an animal instinctively reaches for, the shadows, the depths, the stillness, are exactly the ones that do not work here. And once it commits, it moves. When a leopard seal breaks from its ambush, it accelerates hard through the water, fast enough that once it has locked onto a target, the closing distance is very nearly a sentence. 6. Why does it look like it's smiling? The corners of the leopard seal's mouth curve permanently upward, fixed there by the anatomy of the jaw, so the face appears to be grinning no matter what the animal is doing, resting, hunting, drifting past a camera lens, or closing on a penguin. The expression never changes because it was never an expression. It wears the smile of the Joker, a grin stretched onto a face that means something entirely different underneath. But behind that easy grin sits a mind that is unsettling in a very different way. This is an animal intelligent enough to do things we normally only see in killer whales, not in a seal. It watches, it assesses, it appears to make decisions about creatures it has never encountered before, and to change its behavior based on what it decides. Observers have recorded leopard seals releasing a penguin or a young seal, then catching it again. Releasing it, catching it, over and over. Driving the prey toward shore, then dragging it back out, again and again, until the exhausted animal has nothing left. And sometimes, at the end of all that, the seal simply lets it go. It never eats. In 2006, National Geographic photographer Paul Nicholin slipped into the water in Antarctica to shoot leopard seals. Almost at once, an enormous female swam straight at him. She did not come to attack. She came to bring him a penguin. For 4 days, she kept it up. She brought him penguins over and over, first live ones, then weakened ones, then dead ones, as if she were walking a slow learner through the lesson one step at a time. The male hangs upside down beneath the ice and sings. Not random noise, structured sequences of sound, repeated, stretching on for hours a day, continuously, for 3 to 4 months on end. Those songs can reach as loud as 177 decibels underwater. Carrying enormous distances through the water and the ice. A dark ocean flooded with the solos of an animal we assumed only knew how to kill. Then comes the detail that changes the whole picture. Males in East Antarctica have a fixed set of 5 song types, and they do not just repeat them at random. They arrange those 5 types into ordered sequences, choosing what follows what. In 2025, scientists measured how predictable those sequences were, how easily, hearing one phrase, you could guess the next. The answer landed almost exactly between a children's nursery rhyme and a song by the Beatles. On the 22nd of July, 2003, Kirsty Brown, a 28-year-old marine biologist with the British Antarctic Survey, was snorkeling near the Rothera research station when a leopard seal pulled her under. Her team worked to revive her for an hour. They could not bring her back. She was an experienced, professional diver, so this was not a failure of skill. And to this day, it remains the first and only recorded death of a human caused by a leopard seal, anywhere, ever. Across decades of records of people meeting these animals underwater, scientists have found that most of those encounters are driven by curiosity, not aggression. The seal typically swims in to investigate, to press its face close, to look at the strange visitor in its water, and then simply moves on. Divers describe being studied, not stalked. The leading idea about that one rare, fatal case is unsettling in its simplicity. At the ice edge, a person moving awkwardly in the water can look a lot like a penguin, the familiar prey, and a hunter may respond to that shape before it understands its mistake. The risk is not rising because the animal is growing more hostile. It is rising because more and more humans keep coming to Antarctica. It is dangerous. That is real. 10. So, who is terrified of the leopard seal and what it fears? Penguins hesitate at the edge of the ice. weighing the water before they commit to it. Fur seals take long detours around stretches of coast they know too well. Even elephant seals, many times heavier than a leopard seal, keep their distance. None of these animals holds a meeting about it. Each one simply carries, in its instincts, a rule about where not to be. And all of those rules bend around the same shape in the water. An entire ecosystem quietly arranges itself around where this one animal chooses to hunt. That is why science calls it an apex predator, a species that, within its own niche, is almost never hunted by anything else. There is exactly one animal on record that hunts leopard seals, and it is the killer whale. Even then, it barely happens. Orcas very rarely take the risk of hunting a leopard seal, because this is prey that fights back hard enough to make the attempt costly. In one recorded encounter, a single leopard seal held out against a pod of killer whales, the pod using their wave-washing technique, sweeping waves over the ice to knock a target into the water, for more than 2 hours before the situation resolved. 2 hours against the ocean's undisputed top predator, working as a coordinated team. That is the kind of resistance that makes even a killer whale think twice. So the right way to name it is this. The orca and the leopard seal are Antarctica's two top predators, working on two different levels. The orca is the apex of the whole ocean. The leopard seal is the apex of the seal world. It is not the animal with no enemies. It is the animal that is almost never hunted. We know now what the smile really is. Just a shape. A permanent upward curve of the mouth that means nothing at all. The astonishing thing was never the grin. It was the mind behind it. A mind that knows how to ambush at a doorway, how to teach a lesson, and how to compose a song. This animal was hunting and singing beneath the Antarctic ice long before a single human ever set foot on the continent. Not until the 24th of January, 1895, did the first party set foot on the Antarctic mainland, and the leopard seals were already there, already ambushing at the ice edge, already filling the dark water with those structured songs, and had been for a very long time. We are the newcomers here. Latecomers, still working out the basics of a creature that a single death was enough to make us almost afraid to enter the water to study. Maybe what makes all of Antarctica move around this animal is not the teeth at all. Maybe it is the very thing we have just watched, a hunter clever enough to choose when to kill and when to let go, when to take food and when to give it away to a stranger, when to hunt in silence and when to hang beneath the ice and sing for hours. Most predators do one thing supremely well. This one seems to keep choosing moment to moment, and we still cannot fully explain the logic behind those choices. And so the real question is not, why is everything afraid of it? The real question is this: an animal that can do all of that, how much of it are we still failing to understand? You are floating in open water, miles from shore. Nothing under your feet but a mile of cold black Pacific.